Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, the show that takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible.
Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Crystal. I'd like to welcome you all here today, thank you so much, and let you know what we're going to be talking about, which is happiness. Now, not just about happiness, but how do we get it, where it's at, how we change with it, the top 5 happiest places that you can live, and also what happiness means really for each of us. And to start off, I found such a great quote from Aristotle, and it says that happiness depends upon ourselves. And I don't know if that could get any truer, because we are, in fact, the creators of our own destiny. You know, we're the ones that live our lives and push ourselves and decide what we do and don't want to do, whatever that looks like. And happiness is a key part of that. So, let's start off, shall we? What exactly is happiness, right? What do we define it as? The technical definition, right, is that it's an emotional state characterized by feelings of joy, satisfaction, contentment, and fulfillment. While happiness has many different definitions, it is often described as involving positive emotions and life satisfaction, which I'm so glad that they put that in there, because you can't have life satisfaction without happiness, right? It's kind of like it goes hand in hand, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. For now, I'd like to share with you guys how we can kind of study our happiness and what that looks like. There was a study done, it's actually still ongoing, since 1938. Right, when they started this, a group of people got together at Harvard and decided that they wanted to study 268 people through their lives. Well, now, as of this recording, 19 of them are still alive, and they're subsequently also recording the some 1,300 family members of those original people as well, which I think is fantastic. So what they did is they got people that were educated, they got people that were in poorer parts of the town, some went on to become businessmen, doctors, lawyers, some ended up with schizophrenia, alcoholism, and none of this was obviously inevitable. No one could have predicted these things, right? But studying their happiness every year, looking at them, getting their medical records, speaking with their family, talking to their children, talking about what they do for work, where they're at in their lives, what their relationships are huge parts of that study. And one of the key things that they found is that no matter what, the people that were the happiest when they were about 50 years or so, and onward into now their 80s, it was strictly because of the quality of their relationships. And they did find that many of the participants as well, you know, once it had gone into alcoholism or smoking and such, had found that those participants, right, had a higher level of loneliness. And there's a fantastic TED Talk about this by the gentleman Robert Waldinger. It's about a 12 or 15 minute YouTube video. It's super informative. It's about this study, and he actually, Robert himself, is the third director of this study. So he's incredibly excited about it, and that comes through full circle on the TED Talk itself, if you're able to watch it at some point. And, you know, what really does make a good life? You know, is it marital satisfaction, mental health, monetary things? You know, it could be a collection of all of those for each individual, not just for the collective group, right? And according to the study, you know, good relationships, and I'll put a quote in here, good relationships don't just protect our bodies, they protect our brains. And those good relationships, they don't have to be smooth all the time. Some of the couples would bicker with each other every day, but then they felt that those were the people that they could really count on when things got tough, or, you know, those arguments that they had weren't taking a toll on the memories and levels of happiness that these people were having. And education is a huge part of that too. The study also found that the people who had more access to higher education, even in the inner cities, were more likely to stop smoking. They were more likely to eat sensibly, use alcohol in moderation, and then those factors gave them better odds for living longer and happier lives. And when the study began, you know, no one cared about empathy or attachment. No one was thinking about it like that. They thought, well, let's just study these people and see what happens in their life. And if you think about it, that's pretty insane, because no study like this has been that ongoing. This is the only one. You know, many of them have. There have been many, many, many studies that you can look up over the course of our history as we understand it that have tried to maintain long-term studies, but they just always somehow peter out, unfortunately, except for this one. And I'd hope that we get to see more information about it a little later on as well. So when we think about this study, that a group of people got together to understand and follow another group of humans for this long, 80 years. 80 years, that's such a long time. Just to make sure that they're happy. It really does give you kind of a sense, for me at least, of kind of taking a step back and saying to yourself, wow, do I look at myself like that? Right? So, you know, we do get so caught up in things, don't we, as humans, you know, with, especially, of course, now with the pandemic, it makes it even harder to maintain those relationships. You know, everything is completely changed around now, from how we work to where we go, how we dress, the things we discuss, the things we do. It's all changed. Some for the better, some not, right? And we have to be happy about those bad times too. So we know that happiness is for ourselves. We know that it has to do with positive emotions and life satisfaction. And this study, if we take it and minimize it for each individual, we might be able to get a little bit more out of it. So what I mean by that is, you know, when we realize that somebody's actually studying other humans to see their levels of happiness, we can definitely do that for ourselves too. I'm utmost certain of it. In addition to this study, guys, right? Okay, there was another fantastic article I found. And Susan Charles, who earned her PhD in psychology in 1997, has been also doing things with happiness. And they actually created a graph chart, right, about what happiness actually looks like. And they said, your happiness won't necessarily come through during your childhood days, or when we're forging careers, or even when we're raising our children. Counterintuitively, study after study has shown that the happiest days of our lives will occur in old age. But in fact, if you plot out a graph with a line representing our life satisfaction across the lifespan, you wouldn't just see a steady decline. No, my friends. You would see a U shape. A whole U shape, right? Which I was not expecting at all. So, and a lot of people during this particular instance were asking themselves, what are the positives of aging? How do we as people grow happier as we age? Is it the absence of stress? Is it the focus on being able to, bring more joy into their life, or whatever the case? Now, they actually found it's much simpler than that. It's linked to activity. They show that activity is a major determinant of how we feel at a moment. So, for instance, many people don't have jobs that they enjoy very much. When we retire, we have better days as we spend less time on activities that aren't as enjoyable and cause high levels of stress. We also have more time to spend with others. So when we're not taking care of things that don't really give us joy, when we have time for all the other things is when we become a little happier, which I guess does definitely make sense, right? And it seems that as we age, our brains become increasingly wired to concentrate on more positive things. They show that older people pay more attention to positive stimuli, such as babies or athletes celebrating, whereas younger people tend to put more positive stimuli or negative stimuli on things like graveyards or death or some kind of horrific accident, right? And maybe it's just the thrill of it, right? We all imagine things. We've all watched movies or read books and thought of ourselves in those same situations. So I totally get this for sure. And it makes me feel a little bit better inside. Like, when I get really old and I'm like 90, I might be like super extra happy. No, I'm already pretty happy, but let's face it, we could all use some improvement in some way or another, right? So pretty soon we're going to get into our next segment and talk about kind of how we obtain happiness, things that we can do for it, what haven't we done for it, more facts on happiness. But I want to quick point out some other information I think would be helpful for you guys, and it was very helpful for me. There was another additional study done. I know it's crazy, right? All of these studies, can you believe it? And they found that when they asked people on a scale of 1 to 3, how happy they are, okay, 1 to 3, the actual average, I don't remember if it's in the United States or if it's like the world average, but the average, regardless, is 2.18, which is basically like 14%, feel that they're very happy. And actually, surprisingly, this is down by 31%. And this was a poll done in 2018, so it's 2021. I'd hope it hasn't gone down anymore, but at any rate, with the pandemic and everything, I could for sure see how people can be a little bit more depressed about stuff. This was so unexpected in a way, and it changed so many things around the world, government-wise, relationship-wise. We'd really fallen into like a sense of kind of normalcy, right? And then bam. So I don't know about any of you guys, but for myself, the pandemic has been very interesting, and I'm actually grateful for it. It hasn't been the best every time or every day. There's been things that I wish we could do, and at the same time, there's things that I like about it. So who knows? I guess maybe it's all a little bit perspective. But join us next, and we're going to get into the next segment here in just a second. Be right back.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Before we hop into the next segment here, I just want to share with you guys a little bit more about this study that we were talking about with the U-shaped pattern. When they started looking at other things, not just like the overall longevity of it, right, but the actual emotional part of it, they found that in our 20s, we're at like a moderate level of life satisfaction, and then it drops down to the lowest levels in our early 50s. So it starts shooting up through age 80. So it's not like exactly a U shape, it's like a slanted backwards J. But when you start looking at it just emotionally, right? Anger, frustration, stress, feelings of distress, especially those particular feelings are going to be higher for someone who's a younger adult. You know, they have less control over their emotions. They're resulting, this would result in like a linear decline, right, across the lifespan, because they are younger. And when you respond to your different stress levels and when you analyze them, you can get a better handle on where you're really at that particular time. But if you just let stuff go or bottle it up and don't really assess it, what good is that doing? I know it doesn't do me any good. If I don't take a step back and look at why I'm feeling angry or frustrated or upset, it could just be that I'm hungry, right? We all get that. Like, you wake up, you're running around, you're doing errands, and before you know it, you've forgotten to have a snack. You know, and when we regulate our emotions, we have to talk about our environment too. You know, minimizing our exposure to things that will upset us, making sure we have different outlets to maximize those times when we're not happy, to counterintuitive them. No, I'm sorry, that's not correct. That's not what I wanted to say. To reprocess them. I can totally talk. To reprocess our emotions from whatever we're feeling into something that's more helpful. You know, and a lot of older adults too, I know my grandfather for sure, he perceived time in life as he got older as more precious. You know, he wanted to have deeper, more meaningful experiences as he got older than from when he was in his 20s or 30s. So the fact that 20 or 30-some-year-old kids aren't as happy as a 60 or 70-year-old couple, I don't think is the craziest thing in the world. You know, it's important to realize that no matter what's going on, you know, you can only compare so much as well. And really, we just want to have the best parts of life, don't we? You know? And with that, let's get into our next segment, guys. Okay, are you ready? Because we're going to be talking about how we obtain happiness, what we have done with it, and some interesting facts about happiness that I think you guys will enjoy. Plus, stay tuned for the top happiest places in the world. Alright, and welcome back. Thank you guys for still joining in today. I'm very glad that you and I can learn about this stuff together. Now, earlier, if you remember, we talked about some studies that had been done on happiness, kind of what was involved with that, and what happiness really is. What I'd like to segue now into is how do we obtain it? What are some things that we can do to really be happy? How easy is it? I mean, it might actually be way easier than we think to be happy, or change our mindset to be like that. So who knows? There's definitely some things that we're going to get into that can make our lives a little bit easier. And one of those things is gratitude. You know, I'm sure we're all grateful for the things that we have or have experienced, or the people we have around us, and the environments that we can explore. It has a huge impact on our mental health, our health care. It emphasizes the cost efficiency of things. It emphasizes, how less depressed we can be, how many more blessings we feel that we have, and gratitude is, definitely beneficial for people who struggle with mental health concerns as well. I'm sure not even just that, but everybody, of course. So gratitude can unbind us from these toxic emotions that we have. They have things that are called gratitude groups. They have writing exercises that you can do. You can create a gratitude journal, even. For myself, I want so badly to wake up or right before bed, write in a journal and say 3 things that were fantastic that day, or something like that, right? And I've just never gotten around to it. But for myself, I tend to just kind of personally say a little mantra of gratitude as I wake up, or sometime during the day even. It could be an unexpected moment as well. And I think even as long as we're doing something small like that, it can have such a larger impact on our mindset and our emotional framework, how we thrive, right? And gratitude can even help even if you don't share it with other people, right? It takes time. It does take time to really feel any kind of benefits. It's not an instantaneous placebo drug, right? You can't just take it and get a sugar high. I would take so many gratitude pills. I really would. So with that, how does that affect our brain, and what kind of gratitude journals are there? What are some other things that we can look at that happens? Well, they have things called bliss books, which it's super cool. I really dig the name too. Okay, so a bliss book is a book of images that make you smile. It could be pictures of your kids, some crayons, a beach, some awesome animals, a road trip. You could find pictures online that make you smile, pictures of a book, passages, anything that you look at and you can just soak up those feel-good vibes when you look at these images, right? That's what you want. And if you combine all of those images into a nice little book, you have yourself a little happy journal. Okay. Another thing we can do is build a playlist or two. Definitely apps like Spotify, Amazon Music, iTunes, Pandora. There's so many apps that have playlists already compiled. Now, I know for a fact, it's kind of related, right? So I was on Spotify, and I like to look through playlists, and I like to just type in generic names or like random stuff that pops in my head. And did you guys know that there is a playlist for the pasta company, Barilla, I think it is Barilla, I think. And depending on what type of pasta you're cooking, the segment of song that they play is actually coordinated to the cooking time as well. So you imagine you're in your kitchen, you're cooking up a nice pot of spaghetti. You've already handmade meatballs. They're in the oven. They're like getting amazing flavor. and you're cooking your pasta, you put your playlist on, and then just as soon as the playlist's over, you know your pasta's fully cooked. So I think that's a really cool trick that they put for people to use, and I want to know now how many people have used that app. Now, another thing that we can do is to reread our gratitude journals. You know, as humans, we tend to forget things as time goes on. We especially with memories, right? They can change. The way we felt about a memory, the way we experienced a memory, the way we did anything with it, right? I remember when I was little, we lived near this beach town, and every year they'd have a festival for the 4th of July. They have a little carnival set up, so I'd walk from my grandma's house, and I'd walk down to the beach and into this carnival, and I would always get a snow cone, and I would think about getting an elephant ear, but I could never finish it. So I'd walk around, I'd play some dart games, I'd stroll on the beach, experience the people, smell the carnival smells, the cotton candy, the lemonade, all of it. And I was like, this is amazing. And then years go by, you know, you move out of town, you start living your best life, right? You go back to visit. And this huge wave of nostalgia just sets in, right? And you remember all these amazing things. And I did become a little bit sad because it was so cool and wonderful, and I enjoyed it so much as many times as I went. And I realized as an adult, I was like, you know, this was a lot bigger when I was little, and it, you know, it made me kind of chuckle because it's true. You know, even kids have such a broad imagination. Everything is much, much bigger to them, not just actually because they're physically kids, but, you know, in their heads too. It's so much more impactful. And I think that we can really take something away from that alone. You take your dog out for a walk, and you should be able to stop for a minute and really enjoy that time. The smells, the sense of the sun, the rain, the wind, the flowers, the way the people are dressed, the way the street's nice and clean, or whatever the case, and pick something and just admire it. So if you're going to do a journal, and an option would be to reread your gratitude journal, because like we were saying with memories, they change over time. They're different, they're varied, and if we go back and reread, I can really say it, I promise, the things that we were already grateful for, well, I mean, how can we not be happy about that? We've already talked about going outside, and one of those other things is going on hikes, volunteering your time, whether it be a homeless shelter, an animal shelter, volunteering in your local community, even helping your friends out with some of their projects. There are a plethora of things to explore and do. Another great action I think that some of us could take, or would be willing to take, for having more happiness in life is to read books on happiness. And I have for you guys, I'm very excited about this, the top 5 books as of this recording that will help you learn how to be more happy. And I'll list them off now. I've read one of these. I might actually own it. But the first book is Authentic Happiness by Martin Seligman. That was made in 2002. The second book is The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama. I think that's the one I actually own, or some version of one of his books. The third book is The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. And then The How of Happiness. And I hope I say your name correctly, and I'm so sorry. Sonia Lubomirsky. Okay, hopefully that was correct. Please feel free to check out any of those books, or even any that just catch your eye. It doesn't even have to be about happiness, right? You could pick up a comic book. You could pick up a teenage novel book. You could pick up fiction, art, history, world literature, magic, whatever you're into, find something. Could be science, maths, social studies, anything like that. Talk to somebody about their favorite book. Find out what your spouse or your best friend likes as well, and maybe it'll spark some joy in you too. And with all this being said, I think these are all great actions we can take. The journaling, the book reading, we can smile more, we can exercise, drink plenty of water, get enough sleep, be grateful, wake up grateful, wake up, say, thank you for today, or whatever it is. It doesn't even have to be in the morning. I think that if we just push aside a little bit of time to say thank you, it might have a profound impact. I don't know. You guys can tell me if you find out. Acknowledging unhappy moments, being extra happy for those other people around you that are celebrating at that time. And what we also find out about happiness is that it does have a big impact. Pets make you happy. Phone calls are, I should say, phone calls make you happier than text messages, which is not a thing that I knew. And again, like I said, we do tend to get happier as we age, but we don't want the freedom boost in our lives for money or anything. We want it so we can have our time and we can enjoy it with whomever we want to enjoy it with. And your actions to give yourself a better life, like I said, whether it's journaling or walking around or maybe picking up an art class or learning how to make your own wine, drawing, learning how to write a storybook, knitting. I mean, there is anything and everything under the sun that you can do as a hobby, as a side project, learning guitar. And we have so much time with this pandemic that even though we are closed off from people and from some sense of normalcy, at least we can take away with the fact that we can grow ourselves. It really does stink, I'm fortunate enough to have some family here in the house with me that I can be around. But for those that are really, really by themselves, it must be harder. And we have to really try to keep a good mental, positive attitude about that. We have to put our best foot forward and really attempt to try, right? So, we also, with that said, don't want to give too much, right? And how does that correlate, right? Because if we're super happy or we're getting happier and we want to share our happiness or we want to give back to the world or the community or whatever the case, you can only give so much before it's too much and then you don't have anything left, right? So coming up, we are going to finally talk about some of those elusive happy places that are around the world to live. And also, we will discuss, how we can change other things and maybe what we lack in our own inspiration and how to really deliver happiness to ourselves. It's contagious. Happy people, also tend to live in small towns and rural areas. I'm just going to leave that because I don't think I can actually say it this time properly. So I apologize to you guys. And what's interesting is that people who are over happy, because I guess there is such a thing as being overly happy, tend to make more mistakes. There was this researchers that had developed a concept of depressive realism, right? And that the depressed people have a more accurate view of the world around them and their place in it. So the participants were asked to press a button and a green light would or would not turn on. When asked to rate the level of control they felt they had over the light, the non-depressed subjects overestimated how much control they had, while the depressed students were much more accurate. And that can definitely tell us a lot right there. More about that in just a few minutes. Okay, guys? Can't wait to get back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Alright, thank you guys for still joining me back for our third segment. We just wrapped up some conversation about a research study participants had gone through, and it rated how much control they felt they had or did not have over a specific button, right? We also went and talked about things that we can do to bring about our own happiness. Things that we can implement in our daily lives that might bring us more joy and foster those great feelings. Now in this third segment, like I promised, we are going to talk about some of those really happiest places around the world and the not so happy, because, well, we have to appreciate it all, don't we? Okay. So back to the study real quick though. Since the depressed students were much more accurate than the non-depressed subjects, you have to kind of wonder, right? It's really all about that balance. If you don't have, I guess it varies, because as we've talked about, we've learned what happiness is. We've talked about how we can get happiness. We've talked about how we can achieve happiness in our day-to-day lives, and how that varies from person to person. So wouldn't it make sense as well, in relation to this study, right, that if you were both accurately happy and accurately depressed, that you have more of a position in the world to really analyze and decide how much control we really do have. So I'm just imagining, right, how little control, how much overestimation some people have because they're really, really happy. And what are we overestimating? Exactly. It would be really interesting to find out, I think. Now, I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but there is a list of 20 keys to a happy life. I'm just going to give you a couple of them right now. The number 20 is don't waste an opportunity. Tell someone you love them. Wow, I really love that. Especially nowadays. It's so important, especially when we get those FaceTime calls or those Zoom meetings if they're non-professional, right? Really saying how much people care about stuff. Number 19, don't rain on other people's parades. That would be terrible. 18, when you arrive at your job in the morning, let the first thing you say brighten everyone's day. Oh, that's nice. 17, remember that winners do what losers don't want to do. Well, again, the devil's in the details, right? Number 16, leave everything better than you found it. 15, remember that overnight success usually takes 25 years. I think that's funny, because it's not really overnight, right? It's like a whole decade, 2 decades. Number 14, learn how to show cheerfulness even when you don't feel it. I like that one because, you can be having a bad day, but if you still act a little happier, it might actually bring you up a little bit, you know? And I think that's really nice. 13, keep your promises. This one is so important. And I think I must admit to you guys that making sure that you don't make promises you can't keep is equally as important in my eyes. I don't know how you feel about that. It would be terrible. Number 12, don't forget that a person's greatest emotional need is to feel appreciated. And that is so true. 11, be kinder than you have to be. Oh, that is some great advice. That is some great advice. I hope I get to follow that more, because it is hard to be kind sometimes. You want to be. You want to be kind to everyone, or at least I hope everyone does. And yet we have those times. And I will save the next 10 for later on in the next segment. But finally, I'm going to get to a couple of the top places to live, the happiest places to live in the world, the top 10 that we have been waiting on. And I will give you the first 5. Okay, and this, guys, was just released from The Traveler. It was just released as of March 2021, so super, super recent list. Coming in at number 10, we have Austria. They have high scores of life expectancy, and the number one takeaway is that continuing research is that if you want to be happy, the first step is to stop stressing about how happy you are and go for a bike ride. No, it's cute. Coming in at number 9, we have New Zealand, and for all of you Lord of the Rings fans out there, I want to go to New Zealand so badly. I will totally make a dream trip about it, and I'll put it on like one of those big dream boards. I think they call them like manifestation boards too, and this was another trick I was going to give you guys. You actually can get like one of those dollar store poster boards or some cardboard you have laying around, right? And the object is to put stuff on the board that you want to accomplish for that year or that you want to get, right? Let's say that you want to get a motorcycle, or you want to take your dream vacation, or you want to like purchase a pair of shoes or something, right? And you put this on, or you want to get fit, right? Anything at all, okay? You want to cook amazing meals. You put all these pictures and inspiration up on this board. You can just glue them on, right, or staple them, or whatever you have. And every day you look at that, and you start manifesting these ideas in your head of, I'm picturing myself having this thing, I'm picturing myself doing this or that. And I have found a lot of people that have done these boards, a lot of them have said that it's really helped them push through some of their goals. And before they knew it, some of them have been reached even before the deadlines. A personal friend of mine does a lot of at-home work selling for adult boutique items, right? And she has surpassed so many of her own goals, and I'm so proud of her. And she says that one of the keys to that was her manifestation boards. So maybe a nice little tip or trick to try. Okay, so New Zealand. Number 8 is Luxembourg, and it actually went from 14th all the way up to 10th, but then got bumped down again, unfortunately. But it's still really great. They have a great healthcare system and an excellent work-life balance. Coming in at number 7, we have Sweden this year. It's in a nice, remaining in the 7th spot. And let's see. Number 6 is Norway. And I think I'll stop there to tease you a little bit. Now, to some of the least happy places in the world, we have Yemen. You know, I know I've seen Yemen on a map, but I can't geographically at this point pinpoint it. Botswana, Tanzania, Central African Republic, and then we also have Rwanda, Zimbabwe, South Sudan, and Afghanistan, rounding out the top world's least happy countries to those 7 guys. I apologize. Hopefully we can make some changes in a positive direction. So now we've found a couple places, and if you happen to live in one of the most happy places in the world, or even the least happiest, let us know how it is. We found out that these are places we can travel to. We can have experiences there. We can meet people from there. We can find them out on Facebook or, Zoom or something, and maybe garner relationships across the country and get to know people and see what their culture's like, and maybe take some good things away from that. And we have to keep in mind, too, that it's not just about where we live, right? To find happiness, there's got to be other stuff to it, and there are a few steps we can also take. We can be with others who make us smile. Their joy becomes our joy, and then together we are joyful. You want to hold on to your values, for sure. What you find true, what you know is fair, what you believe in. Those are all values, and over time, the more you honor them, the more you feel gratitude for them, and the more you exalt them, the better you feel about yourself and those you love. So keeping to our values is definitely going to be one of those key things, because if we don't stick to what we find true and believable and honest, then we're definitely just lying to ourselves. We have to accept the good. We have to imagine the best, and we have to do things that we love. There has to be a purpose in what we're finding. We want to contribute to the well-being of humanity. Most people want to be a part of something greater simply because it's fulfilling, and we have to listen to our heart. We really do. We can go with our instinct, but our heart is going to lead us really where we want to be. We have to push ourselves. We can't push others to do the work for us either. If we want to have gratitude journals, and we want to wake up in the morning and have a cup of tea and meditate or work out or read a book and get caught up on our emails before we start work, and those habits stick with you and they form good reactions and they form happy moments for you, and it's consistent, keep going. But don't push others to do the same if they're not comfortable with it, or they're unfamiliar, or maybe they're just not ready. And that's a huge thing too. Your acceptance of being ready and your self-acknowledgement of being ready. Because if you don't ask yourself these serious questions, we're never going to get anywhere, right? We have to be open to change. We have to be totally and unobliterated. That's not even the word. We have to be so open, right, to make extraordinary changes, to do extraordinary things, to be extraordinary. When we want to bask in the simple pleasures as well, we don't want to take things for granted, right? And that's some of the things we can take for keys to happiness. We already went through the first 10, right? We also want to know to be tough-minded, but tender-hearted, right? We don't want to be taken advantage of, but we want to be soft in our approach and our love. We want to pray not for things, but for wisdom and change, which, to be honest, I do this practically every day. I don't want for any material possessions or anything, but I do want certain changes in life, and I do pray for that. And whatever your belief system, as long as you hold it true to yourself, keep it up. We have to remember someone's name, right? How many times have you guys been introduced to somebody in the grocery store or at work, and then you see them again, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't remember their name, and then you just feel so terrible, so you try to slyly ask them, oh yeah, how is this thing going? And you're like, oh, I forgot your last name, and you try to get the information without seeming super rude because you feel so awful. I've done that more times than I can count, and I will say that one of the things that helps me with that is just repeating the name in my head 2 or 3 times right after they've said it, or I'll pick out something like their facial features or their eyes or maybe something that they're wearing, and I'll attribute it to that, so the next time I see them, that's what I'll remember, and then their name stays in my head longer. We can forget about the Joneses. We should not be working to keep up with anybody else. We shouldn't be competing with anybody else because it's their life and it's our life and it all looks different. We never want to give up on anybody. Miracles happen, with a grain of salt, right? We want to treat everyone as you want to be treated. We want to live beneath our means. So even if we have millions of dollars, maybe we're only living on a few thousand, right? I wish I had millions of dollars. We want to be the first to say hello. And I love saying hello. Like, it's a fun word, hello. We can say it in so many ways, and it sounds different every time. Hello, 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 right? The last two that I want to share with you right now before our last segment is to watch a sunrise. And I think this is absolutely beautiful because sunrises and sunsets are never the same. So each one is their own unique experience, just like humans. And the top key thing we can do to be happy is to compliment 3 people every day. Now, I don't know if this is advisable with a pandemic going on, however, but I think that there is something to be said for, we're out, we're able to go get groceries and supplemental needs, and maybe we could try it out, right? We don't have to do 3 people, maybe we just do like 1 and see how comfortable we are. But in any case, whatever you guys decide to try, whatever road you try to take, make sure you're comfortable with it and make sure it feels good for you. Come back for our next segment and we'll talk about what we aspire for and how to deliver happiness and some of the last happy places to live in the world. Stay tuned.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
All right, and thank you guys so much for joining me for the last segment of this show today. If you made it all the way through, I hope you've learned something, and we still have some more to talk about as well. But thank you guys so much for being here. Now, I know we had talked about the top 10 places, the happiest places that you could live, and we got through the first 5, but now I would like to tell you about the top 5 places. And then we will get into a little bit more about, what we can really expect from ourselves and happiness and reasons why sometimes we don't need to stress as much about it as well. So coming in at number 5 are the Netherlands. All right, I think Vincent van Gogh was Dutch, I think. And the 4th place falls to Iceland. I've heard that it's beautiful, and from the pictures that I've seen, it looks almost as nice as New Zealand, but I think New Zealand would probably be a little cooler just because of the whole Lord of the Rings deal, and there's like a whole bunch of hiking that you can do. Or Scotland, that would be super pretty. Coming in at number 3 is Switzerland, which moved up 3 spots this year. Everything is voted on in that country, from how many vacation days to how many immigrants should be allowed in, and guess that system is working for them, being number 3 on the list. Number 2 is going to Denmark. They have a long life expectancy, a lot of social support and generosity among them, but it's also a country hugely committed to renewable energy production. And I'd like to hopefully see a lot more countries get in on that too, because it's quite the state at this point, and we should all try to help our planet. Coming in at number 1 is Finland for the 4th year in a row. Congratulations, guys. It's number 1 when it comes to happiness. It consistently ranks among the top education systems in the world. It occasionally gets beaten out by countries like South Korea, Japan, Singapore, but much of that success comes from a widespread revere for teachers who are required to have a master's degree. Their education is state-funded. And a pedagogical system that focuses less on quantitative testing and more on experiential learning and equal opportunity, right? So congratulations to Finland. And if you ever get to travel to one of these countries, please let me know how happy you are when you visit, okay? I think regardless of where we live, whether we're in the happiest country in the world or the least happy country in the world, we can find something to be grateful for or something to aspire for, right? Which leads me to this part of the segment where we get a little bit more in depth with us. You know, we all have a self-image that we maintain or that we would like to achieve to, right? Something that we're always striving for, and lacking a clearly defined sense of self can often make it tough to know exactly what you want. If you feel uncertain or indecisive when it comes to making important choices, you might end up struggling to make any choice at all. You know, I, for instance, have lived and worked in all but 16 of the states in America, and it was a crazy time. I did a lot of work running around, and I experienced a lot of stuff. And there was times where I didn't know if I wanted to take a job out of state, you know, and travel and go do that work and whatever, but I had to make those choices, and it benefited me quite well. Now, in regards to that, that means that you're going to do a lot of self-check-ins, you know, but where do you fall on the spectrum? Do you notice a lot of patterns of choices? Maybe you don't have many ambitions or deep-seated passions, and you feel simply content to go with the flow. And you can ask yourself these questions to get insight, because if you are content, I applaud you. But then you have to ask yourself, do I want to live with this contentedness? Can I visualize myself in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years with this same sense? Does that seem like it would make me happy? Does saying yes to others make me happy? And it's totally fine to accommodate others sometimes, but if you always agree with what other people want, you likely aren't living for yourself, defining yourself mostly by relationships with others, or your ability to please your loved ones can suggest a less developed sense of self. And your strengths are imbued with that. You know, sense of self depends on not only recognizing your strengths, but also believing in your capabilities to use them to achieve your goals. You have to have a good handle on your talents and maximizing them in your day-to-day life, which often means, again, having a healthy sense of self, you know. And what brings you happiness? What helps you relax and enjoy yourself? What hobbies or activities make your life meaningful? Everyone has a few things in life, and identifying those important people and pursuits can tell you a lot about yourself. Is it soccer? Is it gardening? Is it playing with your kids? Is it having family game night? Is it volunteering at the animal shelter? You know, and where are your values? Do you live a life according to those awarenesses? You know, personal values go a long way in outlining your sense of self. Values describe the traits you prioritize in yourself and others: empathy, honesty, trustworthiness, kindness, and so on. And we look for these things in other people. We should encourage those things, those good things, those deep meaningful connections, we should encourage them to be devoured into our lives, in that strongest sense of the word. Because if we surround ourselves with happy people and people that we aspire to or are inspired by, then there's no reason we can't have that, and there's no reason we can't obtain that and enjoy it and feel more content with it, and we want to make sure that the choices that we make reflect our own interests and not someone else's. If you're not sure how to answer this question, right, you can look at it from another angle. Would you make the same choices if you were alone? Decisions mostly grounded in your desires and goals for yourself typically reflect a strong sense of self, as does those same questions. If I'm alone and I was going to make this decision, is it going to have the same impact? And do I feel as okay with that decision as I would if I'm not, right? Other things that can influence, the who am I really, right? It might reassure you to learn that question, who am I really, is not really uncommon. It's quite prevalent, right? Everyone goes through it. Everyone. I don't think there's a person on this earth that hasn't asked that question, who am I really? Now, this doesn't mean you've done anything wrong or that you're destined to live out your life without a clear identity. It's just that better understanding the factors that play a part in forming your self-image can help to sharpen those characteristics and better answer that question, which is all about individualization, or the process right through which we develop a unique sense of self. It begins in childhood, of course. We need room. The children need to explore, learn, express needs and desires, and they need to do it with gratitude and happiness and respectfulness, right? We're trying to raise generations of people that are helpful to society and will bring an impactful solution to the world that we live in. And when we encourage others to display our personalities without shame or guilt, we can develop a strong sense of ourselves. If your attempts at self-expression earn only criticism or punishment from your parents or friends or anyone else, you might respond by ignoring your internal sense of self. It may seem safer and more beneficial to reshape yourself into someone more easily accepted, but is that what you really want? And it's so hard to go against somebody else's views, right? It's so hard to say, I don't agree with that, or I need to do more research, or I'm not sure yet, because we all want to be liked and we all want to have that acceptance in our lives and with the relationships that we have, right? Those attachments, especially to the primary people, the parents and everything, play a significant role in understanding other relationships in life. An insecure attachment can affect not only the development of your identity, but your behavior in adult romantic relationships as well. When you don't feel certain that you're getting unconditional love and acceptance, you will tailor that experience to meet the approval, right? Which is kind of sad. And it's definitely not living up to our best selves, because having a desire to fit in, if you've struggled with it, and I'm sure we all have, right? Every single one of us has gone into some experience, relationships, work, anything, and at some point felt like we didn't fit in, right? Whether it's anything. So we don't want to be those, social chameleons. So instead of holding on to ourselves, we shift it, and then we're like, oh, this is who we are now, but it's really not, right? We need the acceptance. We need our own individual acceptance to be a powerful motivator to change our views on ourselves, right? And even people that switch in between, right? You're one way with somebody and then you're one way with another. That can even have a bigger impact on how we are happy and who we identify as. So how can we really look at identifying our happiness and bringing in a sense of self that is authentic to us? Well, we have to start by making our own choices, right? You can't let other people make the most important decisions for you, whether it's a job, career, residency, anything, right? It could even be small, right? You want to ask input, but you don't want them to direct it for you, right? And you want to, more importantly, spend time alone. You want to get to know yourself. Take yourself to dinner. right? It's not awkward. It's actually really nice. You want to experiment with new hobbies, volunteer, keeping a journal, and we want to keep considering how we can achieve these ideals. Ask yourself continually what changes in your profession you'd like to have or your interaction with others. Seek help. Know when to get help if you're in a depressive state or low self-esteem or anxiety. Even if you don't have any mental health symptoms, therapy is still a great place to begin the self-exploration process. This podcast can definitely help as well because there's so many attributes that people bring to the table about life and happiness, and we can learn so much from just these type of connections as well. And the bottom line is that self-help, the concept of self, isn't always easy, right? It's because your identity naturally shifts and develops over life as you learn and grow. So when you were 5 and you wanted to be a astronaut and go to the moon, and then you realized that was a lot of school and space was weird, but it was still really awesome. And then you're like, you know what, maybe it's not practical. And now you're like 30 or 40 and you still look up at the stars thinking about the moon, right? So in your heart, you still want something to do with that, and that's fine. It could go the complete opposite way too. We can change over time and we can adapt and evolve, and our happiness is always going to look different. My happiness from 3 years ago looks totally different from what would make me happy today. There are some similarities and basic concepts, but overall, those things change too, and I am grateful for it. I am here for it. I hope you guys are too. And especially with this pandemic again, and we bring it up because it's so relevant. Luckily, it seems that the world has shown quite a lot of resilience. I'm sure we're all ready to get back to concerts and barbecues and summer's on the beach. We can't wait. But until that time when it's okay for us to venture out and we have a sense of normalcy again, it's nice just to have this time to reflect and be honest with ourselves, right? To be happy in the moment, to appreciate in the moment, to love the people we have with us and around us in those moments, and to really stretch our boundaries. The last thing I think anyone would want in life is to look back and have regrets and say to themselves that they could have done more or tried something else, and they're generally happy with their life. I definitely don't want that, and I'm sure you don't either. So these tips and tricks are just some of the start as to what happiness is, what it's about, how we can get it, how we obtain it, and I hope that you have gotten something out of this just as much as I have. And I'd like to close with a quote today from Bernard de Fontenelle, and it says, "A great obstacle to happiness is to expect too much happiness." And I think that's my favorite. So thank you guys so much for joining in today and listening to GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show, write a nice review. It always helps us. And if you can, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you guys, and remember, let us be happy.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find the show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast.